Please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment. I read all of the comments. And now, let's get on with the show. When last we left our intrepid adventurers, we find ourselves a few miles from Mountain Vale in the city of Sylvia's Rest. Von Scala is preparing for the night. There's a knock at the door. It's a friend of hers, Madrigar. She beckons him to come in, and he tells Scala that he has a special message for her. The message is that she should leave the city at once and go into hiding forever, lest a dire thing will happen to her. If possible, he says, she should leave the world. And then, without any other words, he leaves. Elsewhere in Sylvia's Rest, the Ark, Morgan Tyr, is finishing her nightly prayers when one of the priestesses comes and says there's a man at the gate that wants to talk to her. When she goes to answer it, she finds it's her distant cousin, Madrigar. She asks him what he wants. All he says is that he has to go away, but he has a favor for Morgan to perform. The favor is that he wishes Morgan would be nicer to his sister, Paladin Marcia. Morgan says that she'll try, and with that, the mage leaves. In the town of Mountain Vale, Akai, formerly part of Esnith, the weapon, is finishing her nightly prayers. She has felt empty since she passed on the weapon. Suddenly, there's a puff of smoke, and from it emerges her friend, Madrigar. He bids her good evening and apologizes for what he is about to do. He says a single word, and the lights go out for Akai, and she's unconscious. Esnith, the weapon perfected, sits at a bar and consumes large jugs of beer. She staggers to the outside privy, and as she leaves the building, she runs into Madrigar. He touches her on the neck, and she falls asleep. Much later in the evening, and many miles away, in the city of evil, known as Deserata, Akai and Esnith wake up. They're in a tower that is open to the sky. Madrigar is there. He explains to them that all of these years he's been working on tonight, his betrayal. He tells Akai that it was he who abducted her in the forest. He said he needed to see just how powerful she was. And since he now knows, he can blunt the force in Esnith. The women notice for the first time that they can see the glowing jewels on his forehead, which means he's a star mage, also known as a lesser lord of the starry sky. Madrigar says that this will be the night he betrays the forces of good, so that she, Distaria, can become his god. The door opens, and Madrigar bows as Distaria comes into the room. He tells her that Esnith, who is the weapon, that was designed to destroy the world and could destroy the spirit jewels of the star mages, has been rendered inert. Destaria frees Esnith from her bonds with a nod and presents her with a glass dagger. Esnith paces around the room, and suddenly, as if controlled, she heads towards the bound Akai, and Akai can only watch as the other woman gets closer and closer with the blade. She takes a tentative step towards Akai, but then stops and turns and looks at Madrigar, and in a flash she slashes at him, drawing blood. She continues to strike at him because of the jewel in his head and the fact that as a star mage he regenerates when under the open night sky. He heals from each blow, but it still hurts and he's driven backwards. Esnith realizes that she can't hurt him, but she also cannot stop attacking him, and she doesn't know why. From the sidelines giggles Destaria as she makes slashing moves with her hand, and Esnith has no choice but to mimic those actions. Esnith realizes that she's not being controlled by Madrigar. She's being controlled by Destaria, who sits off and giggles at the show. Then, with a moment of clarity, Esnith has control of her own hand, and she takes the blade and plunges it into her neck, and then pulls it across her own throat. Esnith falls to the ground and begins to bleed to death on the floor. Madrigar bends down and tries to summon power to save her. Destaria uses her power to pick him up and pin him against the wall. She says that she knows he was a double agent. She knows of his deception. He was to pretend he was on her side so he could get Esnith, the weapon perfected, near her and then kill her and then steal her power for himself. She knows that long ago he tricked Adrigar Alluvial, one of the last star mages, the same way. But she has dampened Esnith's power the minute she came into the room. She says that the weapon is powerful, but no match for her abilities. And with emotion, she breaks Madrigar's bones and forces him to the ground, hitting him with bolts of force. Suddenly, there is a sound. Esnith's body stands up, and there's a loud, piercing scream from her throat. Esnith herself feels a different kind of power coursing up through her. It's not the hot fire of a volcano, but instead a piercing needle-like shriek that threatens to deafen those in the room. As if struck by a dagger, Destaria staggers back and holds her head. There's a sound of shattering crystal as the spirit jewel in her forehead breaks, and then a gout of blood pours from her forehead. She screams that she is blind, and then falls to the ground, thrashing. Madrigar crawls to make his escape, but the sound catches him as well. He grips his head, and then there is a popping sound as his spirit jewel crumbles as well, and he lays back down on the ground, dead. Esnith returns herself to the being of pure power that the weapon is, and she reaches and frees Akai, and then opens a gate to another world. she takes a small piece of her life essence and lets it melt into Akai's hand, and then causes the gate to transport Akai elsewhere. Then alone, she looks at the two dead bodies on the floor. She considers the destruction of the city, but decides not to. Then she becomes a bolt of pure energy and escapes off into the sky.